In most cases in history, meaningful political change requires a revolution. My mind goes to the Haitian Revolution.
But it was in like the 18th century. When I look at like today, the amount of resources that say the bourgeoisie have, it's hard to use the violent means because you're not going to win that one. You have to shift culture first. And once you then shift culture, there has to be a shift of policy.
Politics is captured by capitalism. So it doesn't really matter who you elect in. Obama's a good example of that. Welcome back to Think Twice, your favorite ethics and moral philosophy show. My name's Sam Teff.
My name's Benz.
And today we're going to be talking about the morality of political change. Now, we see a lot of oppression all over the world, in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Congo, amongst a lot of other places. And personally, I feel helpless. I feel like I can't make a difference from where I'm sat here in the UK. So today, what we're going to do is explore how we can actually make that political change and see the change that we want to see both at home and overseas. And to answer that question, we're going to look to historical examples and a little bit of philosophy to see what it is we can do in 2025.
Yeah, it sounds perfect. Like I think political change is one of those things that you would hope history would be able to guide you on, right? Like 100%. You would hope you would be able to understand how to affect the place you're living in.
Yeah.
And as a result, once you affect the place you're living in, it will then affect other places around it, right?
100%.
And that's sort of the hope for this, to sort of understand the strategy in a way to sort of approach this. But what actually makes it quite difficult and what throws in sort of wrenches is that historically things were so much different. So you also have to factor that in, that like, how valuable are these historical sort of anecdotes, not facts, if anything, to today that allows us to broach our strategy for and broach our discussion around political change.
100%, and we'll be debating the relevance of each of the examples that we all bring to the table.
Yeah, exactly. So, question one, can constant incremental change ever replace bold revolutionary change?
I think no. I think meaningful political change requires drastic revolutionary change. And I think in most cases in history, the examples of meaningful political change have been brought about by revolution. So I'm going to try and argue today that no, you do need revolution for meaningful political change. What do you think?
It's weird because I think the obvious answer is like revolutionary change. Like I think historically, like when you look at how things have happened, you would go to bold revolutionary change. But in the stage of capitalism that we're in and the way the world sort of works now, I think it is incremental change. I think it's already replaced it, if anything.
Before you expand though, I will qualify my answer. I do think that if we look at historical examples of revolution, often it's not one or the other. It's not either you have a massive rebellion and a massive uprising from the people march on the palace, they take power, and they change their country for the better. That's not usually how it goes. Usually how it goes, and the example that my mind goes to is the Haitian Revolution, which is, the biggest, most successful slave rebellion of all time.
But it was in like the 18th century.
It was in the 18th century, but I think is a good example of how complicated rebellion and revolution is. And to bring it back to the question about would it be incremental change or bold rebellion, if we look at the Haitian example, there are bubbling like forces that happen very slowly before the massive rebellion. And even if you look at the actual revolution, the revolution took 15 years from the point at which the revolution started. Even the date at which it started is not clear. There's multiple matches that like light the spark for the violence. But even before that, slaves were quietly rebelling. Like they're practicing African spirituality in private, away from like main society. Their masters are not seeing what they're doing. They're convening together, they're holding meetings.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you know what I mean? So I guess my answer is yes, it's revolution, but incremental change is also part of the makeup of how society changes.
Yeah, because what you're talking about is like culture first, and like, of course, culture sort of shifts before you have the bold revolutionary change that you're discussing, right? But like the way I sort of looked at this question and the way I saw incremental change, I was like, okay, I saw the Haitian Revolution, I looked at the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and like, they're all so long ago.
Right, you didn't feel like it was relevant.
Yeah, well, it's not relevant, but you have to understand the context of these revolutions, right? And so when I look at like today, and I look at the power of neoliberalism today, it wasn't like this in the 1950s. And when you look at like what's happened, like the deregulation in the 70s to the 2000s, and the sort of left shifting towards the center, and the breakup of unions, and the support from WTO and like the World Bank and the IMF, and the way they sort of institutionally support neoliberalism, it then, like, those little incremental changes now lead you to this point. Culturally, they started to put it into your mind. So culturally, where you get the hustle hard, like if you work hard, you get this. And that is a culture, and a lot of people still have that. And so that was the culture, and then institutionally it changed around you, and then now you're sitting here. And yeah, you didn't get the drastic, revolutionary, violent conflict, but you get something drastically different today from 70 years ago that like changed just slightly more and more.
So I guess what you're doing is you're mirroring the development of oppression over the last 100 years. And you're saying that the way we are oppressed as people has incrementally changed over time.
Exactly. Do you get what I mean? And that's the way I sort of saw it. And like, to change it the other way, I think just because it's so powerful now as well, and the amount of resources that, say, the bourgeoisie have, it's hard to use the violent means because you're not going to win that one. So obviously you have to shift culture first. That's what this show is all about, essentially, like to shift culture first. And once you then shift culture, hopefully the people that grew up on your sort of rhetoric and around you are the people that end up sort of in powerful positions. But, you know, power corrupts all. So who knows if that then works, you know? They might just shift back to where they were. But like, that is the idea, right?
Right. But I do sort of reject the parallel you've drawn, though, because it's a clever parallel, but like,
thanks, man.
I
really tried with that one.
It's not going to get me, unfortunately. Because I do appreciate that industry, neoliberalism, politics, and big business, they have insidiously, over time, corrupted society's thinking to align with their status quo, right? Like you said, hustle culture, the idea that you can stand alone as an individual and act in the economy as a rational individual, and that's in your best interest. And the adjacent thing to that is to ditch community, to ditch your power as a collective, right? Yes, that has been insidious, but those forces were always in power. I see it as like them reinforcing their power rather than them enacting drastic change through incremental change. And I think even if you were to draw that parallel, the people, the oppressed versus the oppressor, they're like completely different. They're almost diametrically opposed. So I would still go back to those examples in history. Yes, okay, the Haitian Revolution was a long time ago, but there's other more recent examples. If we look at the Montgomery bus protest, that to me was drastic action. That was people just committing to walk for 13 months, a year, and saying, no, I'm not going on the bus. And that hurt people's pockets economically. And that was drastic political action that then led to...
Do you consider that a revolution?
I see it as bold revolutionary change, yeah.
Okay.
And I think if the people in that scenario chose a route that was incremental and they didn't take a bold stand, they would have never really achieved what they did. And I think there's plenty of other examples like that. If we could stay in the American context, we could look at the Black Panthers, we could look at Fred Hampton, we can go to the African context, we can look at Thomas Sankara. And all of these people took bold revolutionary action. It was completely against the status quo, and they were much maligned for what they were doing.
I'm not disagreeing with those things, though.
But I'm saying in those scenarios, if you employed incremental change, if Thomas Sankara did incremental change, he wouldn't have been able to increase the literacy rate to 75%. He wouldn't have been able to feed his people. He wouldn't have got the political change that he was looking for.
I get what you're saying.
We're talking about a lifetime ago, by the way. Like Fred Hampton and Thomas Sankara were like 8 years ago. They're like within a human life.
Within a lifetime. But basically, my issue is that do you have the resources to sort of overcome that? And I just don't know if you do now because of those things that I've said. Late-stage capitalism has a way of absorbing your problem and then marketing it. So, as you said your own self before, in fact, so the idea that you can overcome that with that revolutionary act, I just don't know if it's enough. You get what I mean? I feel like it has to be incremental and constant in order to actually have a shift.
There's a part of what you're saying that I do accept, and I think it's absolutely correct, which is that we do need constant engagement. We do need constant and incremental engagement, right? I.e., me as an individual or as a small group, as a small community, I do need to constantly engage with political problems. And I need to almost like walk the walk that I'm talking, right? If I'm talking like anti-corporate, anti-big business, I should be changing the way I buy stuff, right? I should be trying to change my consumer like habits. I should be trying to withdraw from fast fashion, stop buying stuff off Amazon, and I should protest with my money, right? And that's not going to change the world. It's really not going to do much. But it's that slow bubbling of rebellion, right? It's saying, I'm not happy with the status quo, and I'm going to make small incremental changes in my daily life. But that's not actually going to achieve meaningful political change. I think it's setting the scene for a bigger political change, bold revolutionary action. But I think it's not going to get it done itself. Because like, what are we really talking about when we say incremental change? Like, what are you saying we should be doing to impact?
I was about to give you an example of how you expect bold revolutionary change today, but like sort of incremental change, I'd be thinking changes in policies.
Okay.
Changes in government manifestos. The opposite to deregulation, essentially. Like, that's the way I would start to think that those things could happen.
I guess voting is a big part of that, yeah? So you vote for political change. Like, what do we actually do? We vote the people in that are saying this, right? Or...
In a sense, yeah.
Okay. Do you feel today that when you go to the ballot box, like, your vote...
But I don't think culture shifted. This is what I mean. So, like, culture has to shift. Then the pressure from the electorate, as it is, turns on whoever has to be elected, and then they have to make policies for those people. That's how I see it. Like, if the culture gets to the point where enough people do what you're talking about, there has to be a shift of policy.
Okay,
and
fine.
That's what I'm saying, basically.
Yeah, I guess though, the reason I don't think voting is going to do it, and voting really has never done it in the past, apart from like maybe a few exceptions. And those
I'm not saying voting alone, though.
Like, yeah, but like you know, you exercising your democratic right to pick your
yeah. I'm not actually saying voting alone. I'm not saying like the ballot box is the way to change this. But you told me to give you an example. I think the example is culturally, though.
Yeah, but I'm going to take it even higher. I'm going to go to the level of politics, right? I think we are in a position now where politics is captured, right? It's captured by capitalism. So it doesn't really matter who you elect in. Even if you came and you had a revolutionary leader or someone that you think represents, you know, what you want to do, Obama's a good example of that. There is deep state forces that sit above Obama, right? There's a military industrial complex that sits above Obama, right? Obama came in, he had 8 years in office, and during those 8 years, he drone striked a record amount of people, right? Across the world. This is someone who, you know, African Americans would have thought would understand the plight of black and brown people, not only at home, but across the world. But he's gone and broken the record for the amount of black and brown people he has drone striked across the world. Now, do we blame Obama for that? Maybe. But there's also a military industrial complex that sits above Obama. And what I'm trying to say is that if we change politics, if we have incremental change via politics without bold revolution, you can't enact enough pressure on those forces to be able to make the change that you want.
You see, the way you sort of approach this is slightly different to me.
Okay.
So when I'm talking about incremental change, so for example, would you consider Just Stop Oil a revolutionary sort of act?
Yes. It's definitely bold.
Yeah.
It's like bordering on revolution.
So I see that as like part of the incremental change.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay,
I see that as an aspect of it.
Okay.
I don't see that as the revolutionary change.
No.
And so, like, those sort of things that continue to happen to then shift culture, then you get your actual, in a sense, revolutionary change. It's not as bold, but you get your revolutionary change because those people that have to make decisions have now a care for other people in society.
there's enough pressure has been applied to them.
Exactly.
But what I'm saying is, like, even if we apply pressure, we will get concessions from, let's say, a government. But fundamentally, like, the structures haven't changed. And in order to change a structure, you need to rip power from that structure. The structure's not going to give it to you voluntarily because you asked for it. And I guess that leads us very nicely on to question two.
So question 2 is, can meaningful political change happen without conflict?
No. So here I do take the Marxist critique of capitalism, in that capitalists are not going to give you power willingly. So you can protest, you can agitate, you can make these incremental changes that we talked about in question 1, but really without conflict and direct action, you're not going to get systemic change. So I do believe that conflict is inevitable.
Again, like, so obviously I looked at the time people like Karl Marx spoke.
Yeah.
And Marx was within like brutal factory hours.
Yeah.
And like there was like a rise in working class and there was extreme inequality. And so he had to kind of take that stance. The conditions of him are not the conditions of today. And like whether what he says is still applicable is another thing. But like his actual thoughts are of his time. And I just don't know if you can pull his thoughts out of that time, put them in today and say they work.
Well, let me try and draw the line.
But I do think, I'm agreeing with you. I do think conflict is there.
Yeah.
Like you do need conflict.
Okay, cool. I do think...
It doesn't need to be violent, but there needs to be conflict. Like I don't know how else you can do it otherwise.
Yeah. Let me try and draw a line, the line I have in my head between Marx's time and the time that we have today, right? 2025. To me, if we look at the conditions in the factory, right, that Marx was commentating on, and the conditions of capitalism at that time, really what he's talking about is economic exploitation, right? And I don't believe that economic exploitation has gone away today. Like, we've made massive strides, right? We've made political strides, we've made legal strides, right? The civil rights movement, the abolishment of slavery, like, it's a lot of legal progress, right? But fundamentally, capitalism's still around. And that is the force by which a lot of people are oppressed. And even the conflicts of the world that may not appear to be about capitalism, really underlying them, there are a lot of men chopping off that military profit, right? A lot of what's going on in the world, in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Congo. Congo is a great example. Like, who benefits from the conflict in Congo? It's Apple. It's the people that get to make batteries, lithium batteries for cheap. And the motivation behind this conflict and the human suffering, which is what we're talking about, right? The human oppression, is capitalism. So to me, Marx's critique at his time is very relevant today because we're still living
indirectly, though. That's what it is indirectly.
Yes, but ultimately, the same forces that inspired slavery, they haven't necessarily gone away. It's about how much can you squeeze out of your worker. Slavery is like the ultimate form of capitalism. You don't have to pay them anything. But today, we are oppressed, we are exploited via capitalism. People are suffering in the UK, there's poverty on the rise across the Western world because of capitalism, right? A rampant capitalism, like you would say.
I didn't disagree that there was a link.
Yeah, to be fair. I just want to say that. I think one of the things that I did think about with this question is MLK, he's like the poster boy for non-violent political action.
But I still think that was conflict, though.
Yes, he did accept that conflict was inevitable. I guess his Christian Gandhiist approach to conflict was that you should not initiate violence, right? Yeah. And that's like the non-violent mantra that Martin Luther King had. And I kind of want to ask you, like, where do you sit between the MLK and Malcolm X debate? They both lived in very similar times. They both were very important for Black liberation in America and also, I would say, around the world. Where do you sit on the question of violence between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X?
It's so interesting because I think there's a difference between like where you individually sit and where you sit within your community about it.
Okay.
So like individually, I probably sit quite close to Malcolm X.
I would think so.
Whilst if I'm going to mobilize people and mobilize the community, I would have to sit closer to Martin Luther King.
It's quite interesting that you say that.
Obviously, I'm prepped for that particular question, but the reason why I think like that is because I really struggle to put other people in harm's way, and to put people in harm's way for something that I'm not sure is going to work. I'm really not convinced that you're gonna get the results you want through the violence, but I'd be happy to ride for it. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I'd be happy to ride for it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I could tell someone else to do that, knowing that we might not get what we want and you might come off worse out of this situation. And I'm going to tell you to do that. It feels very manipulative in a sense.
I think you touched on something that is prevalent in Martin Luther King's work. So the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, right? And it was a massive, massive win. Martin Luther King was kind of the face of it. He was very prominent. He was, in a way, the non-violent face, and therefore the more acceptable face of the civil rights movement. I would argue that his approach needed agitation and violent agitation in other areas in order for the civil rights movement to work. So I do think when we talk about Martin Luther King and we say, well, his methods worked, right? He got what he needed to do. I think what's left behind is like the agitation of people like the Black Panthers and the violent uprisings across America that aided Martin Luther King to get the political change he wanted.
Because it's very interesting, because I always do think like you need someone who's sort of delusionally extreme.
Okay.
Somewhat to be held accountable, if that makes sense. Because what that delusional extremist is basically asking for is for everything to be in their favor, which like can't happen. But that is, in essence, the ideal sort of scenario.
Okay.
And it sort of keeps pulling you towards that, even though like the logical side and when you have to deal with everybody that's not part of that same plight pulls you the other way. You then find the middle ground quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, but I don't like that. Like, I don't like the guy who sits nearer the middle. Because what Martin Luther King would often find himself, like, no fault of his own, his theory like makes a lot of sense, and he is for the people. Don't get it twisted. MLK was for the people, period. But the position he would often find himself in is he would be sitting towards the center of his counterparts, and he would be commentating on his counterparts and saying, them man have gone too far. And I think when you find yourself in that position,
You think it dilutes the movement a little bit?
100%. You're selling the man them short. Do you know what I mean? When he's talking about Malcolm X, Martin Luther King famously did a march on Washington, and Malcolm X.
I just think like such complex problems have to be like approached from like various angles. They appear to you like they're diluting your message, but they're just attacking it slightly differently. And I get the doubt and I get the skepticism around that.
Yeah.
But you sort of have to trust in that. It's essential.
Yeah, I agree. I think coming together and like having a united goal, a united front is super important, even if you've got differences in how you might achieve that. Fred Hampton talks about the Rainbow Coalition, right? He talks about people from different classes, different backgrounds, different races all coming together to achieve liberation. That's all what we all want. Let's all go for it. Let's not like beat each other over the head about differences. The question of violence, though, is a big, big question. It's not like something you can be like, oh, he's just got a different opinion to me. It's like the very core of like how we're going to achieve what we're doing. So I think Malcolm X and Martin Luther King constantly had disagreements over that question. MLK did a march on Washington. Malcolm X called him a sellout. He called him a clown, actually.
See, I think that's harmful as well, though.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But I'm saying like this is the depth of the like difference between them, because for MLK, a peaceful march, there are a lot of cameras there. It was a bit of a circus, to be fair. For him, like that works. But for Malcolm, you are selling us short. You're actually allowing co-option of our message by people who are quite happy for you to do non-violent stuff.
But I guess this is the kind of difference, going back to question one, where I think you get to MLK's part and then we get to Malcolm's part. I see that as the incremental change. I just don't see how people from one side can shift to a completely other side. I struggle to see that.
Yes, but if you've got a theoretical basis in what you're doing, i.e., the core of what Malcolm X is saying is violence is being done upon you. And it's like, we don't have to go via some means. In a theoretical sense, we can arrive at the answer if we just do the theory. Malcolm's saying violence is being done upon you. You have to employ violence to liberate yourself. Like, you cannot allow that violence to continue. You have to stop it. And the only language your oppressor understands is violence. That is theoretically sound in my head. I don't need to go via MLK. I don't need to go via something else.
I understand that. If you're gonna win that. Otherwise, you lead your people to their death.
Black people did die. They died at the hands of the FBI, for sure. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they both died. They died at 39.
Are you happy to lead people to that? I don't know if I am. And maybe, obviously, we're talking from a completely different perspective.
The Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. There were riots in LA the next year, August 1965. And by this point, Malcolm X had passed away. So as much as his legacy was still present in the black community, Malcolm X was not there to see what was happening and comment on what was happening. But this is a year after the Civil Rights Movement, and black people are fed up and they're rioting in LA. MLK is shocked, right? A year ago, we passed the biggest, this is the biggest moment of progress in black liberation in American history, period. And a year later, people in LA are rioting. So he goes up to LA. He tells reporters, oh, look, this is what happens when you oppress black people for hundreds of years. That's what he says to reporters in LA at the scene. But these times, a year later, he's talking about the rioters in LA and what's. And he's like, what did them man achieve? Them man knocked down the factories that they wanted to work in. They destroyed the institutions that would have helped them had they co-opted the language of integration, right? He says that in March. Later that year, he also then goes on another interview and he's like, well, the riot is the language of the unheard, right? There's a very famous quote that MLK came up with. The riot is the language of the unheard. Okay, good, you're back on side with the rioters. Do you see how like his tone is like changing month by month, year by year? And then later on, when the Vietnam War comes to a head, this is now 1967, he comes out and he says, how can I condemn the violence of my people in the communities in the US when I haven't condemned the violence of the US abroad in Vietnam? Okay, good, you're back on side. So do you see how my reading of Martin Luther King is that he's many things to many different people? And when you're doing that, you dilute your core message. You're saying too much, like you're going left, right, center. Malcolm X would never have done that. He stays true as an arrow. Now, he does adapt and improve his theory as time goes on, but I can't like...
I think it's too simplistic. And I think there is something about like humanity that you're deemed as honorable because you have some sense of clarity and some lack of nuance.
No, like, it's not a lack of nuance though.
The fact that...
Why is he flip-flopping on what though?
If you're a famous enough leader,
yeah,
you have to accept that you're gonna be misunderstood. That's just the plight of it.
So who's misunderstood him? Okay, have I misunderstood him? Or are you saying he's misunderstood?
Well, it's tough because like
you haven't read this yet,
and I haven't spoken to him. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's really tough. Like even when you're reading, like you don't truly get it. I feel you kind of have to be of the time to truly understand. Like everything we read is through a lens of what someone's given to us. And so if you're genuinely trying to help as much as possible, as many people as possible, to then stick on one thing and be a like I don't want to call Malcolm X that because he wasn't, but like sort of be so far one way, I think you get to die happy. Malcolm X can die happy and say like, boy, like I stuck on that. And that's simple. But is it right? I don't know. I don't think it is.
Yeah, but first of all, I would actually say the legacy of MLK is one that far exceeds that of Malcolm X. Yeah, I think a lot of people would look at Malcolm X and say he went too far. The was too much, and they demonize. That's a stick that Malcolm X gets beaten with. Yeah, MLK is on posters everywhere. Yeah, you know what I mean. He's the face of civil rights.
To you, that's what I mean. To you,
no, but you're saying he gets to die happy. But like I'm saying, MLK actually, he benefited from being acceptable to mainstream like people in a way that Malcolm X didn't. It was actually more difficult for Malcolm X to do what he did.
No, because it's the critics that are at hand here, though.
What do you mean?
So, like, Malcolm X, because of his stance, it was sort of like a lot of his critics weren't, it's tough for me to say this because I haven't done the reading, but I'm pretty sure they weren't black people. And if they were black people that critiqued him, you could say, you're just not down for the cause. Like, because he is unapologetically that, right? Whilst MLK got criticism from his own black people, which just makes it a little bit different. Because the people that you're fighting for are the people criticizing you. It's cool getting criticized by white people. Like,
we need to think, why is that?
Anyway,
we need to think, why is that? Like, when you're getting critique from your own community, the community you're trying to help, those people in Watts, they were chanting, "Long live Malcolm X." Long live Malcolm X, okay?
That's because it was just easier for you to understand. And because, like, when you have multiple messages, they can get lost. Anyway, sorry, let's not even stick on this. Alright, cool. On to the final segment. You are a mid-level official in a government you believe is engaged in harmful policies abroad. You have the ability to subtly slow down or obstruct these policies from within, but this means continuing to serve the regime. Do you resign publicly and protest, or stay and try and resist from the inside?
This answer may shock you, but I really, really like the option of staying and trying to resist from inside. Because I think when it comes down to it practically, the damage you could do from inside that organization, or this is the government in power, I imagine, I actually think it actually far exceeds what you could do from the outside. And it may conflict with what I've said earlier in this episode, but I really think that is a very viable option. And I think people have done it in the past. In history, you have like massive whistleblowers who do work from inside. They collect documents, they slow things down, they block stuff. And if you can keep up that veneer for a while, I think you could do a lot of damage. And these policies that you think are dangerous and damaging, you can do a lot of damage to them. What do you think?
I think something that's really important in this dilemma is as to whether you actually believe you can make the change.
Okay, of course. Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that's crucial to
That's
this.
crucial, yeah.
I've been part of too many large organizations to know that, like, you're not really gonna do it. It's really hard to do it from the inside. Like, I won't, like, it's hard to do it from the inside. Like, I don't get how you think you're gonna shift that. And I don't want to seem to be complicit with it either.
Of course, that's a big problem.
I'd probably resign and protest, like.
Really?
Like,
what do you make of like the people that whistleblowers in the past, like someone like Edward Snowden? Like, how would you rate their revolutionary act, or like, do you think that they progressed?
For me, it always feels a little bit cowardly as well.
Whistleblowing?
Yeah.
Okay, how so?
Because I would happily put my name to stuff.
I mean, Edward Snowden did that.
Did he?
Yeah.
Or was he not found afterwards? Do you get what I mean?
No. They knew what he did. He just fled the country. He's currently still on the run. Like, if he touches down in US, he's arrested, jailed for life.
He put his name to that?
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay, maybe he did, but I mean, I really like the idea of like fighting something and they know I'm fighting them. It's probably quite a personal thing, but I feel more
courageous
doing that. Yeah.
It's also more compelling if you can put your name and your face behind it. But you know, I think the whistleblowers, to be fair to them, when they retract their name, it's because they genuinely like fear for their life.
Yeah.
Because they're out in like a dangerous company.
I'm not to say it is cowardly, but it just feels that way. Do you know what I mean? Like,
fair.
Feels like a little bit weaselly. Like, I feel like a weasel. Like, you know what I mean?
What is it about the organizations that you've been a part of that you would think like make it difficult to make change like that?
Things are so entrenched and like people benefit from the way it is.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do inside to stop these people doing that? Like,
you could gather a lot of intelligence though. You could gather a lot of proof of wrongdoing, which would be illegal, like, or against company policy, and you could release that documentation like out on your way out. Like, but it would require you to be complicit for a little bit and move like a rat. Yeah, you're moving like a rat.
Like a little weasel.
Like a rat on the highway.
That's what it feels like to me. I just feel like, raw, like, you're a snitch, you know, like, that's how it feels to me a little bit, like, it just doesn't feel commendable to me. Whilst like I'll happily, from what I do know, leave the place and happily publicly protest against them.
Yeah, fair. I do think that's a problem, like in my mind, that the complicity with the regime that you're having, it might be tough for people to like welcome you back, depending on how long you stayed. Do you know what I mean? And people might paint you with a brush that's a bit peak.
But nonetheless, like, people that do it, I still see them as...
On our side.
Exactly. I still see it as beneficial.
Right.
Not that I would do that, but I still see it as beneficial. Like.
Fair.
Anyhow, thank you lot for joining us today. See you soon.
Take care. Okay, sound good?
Yes, sir. It's warm in here, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the first one's fine anyway.
Nice. I quite enjoyed that episode.